this screen over here out of my way so I can see you all. All right, well, it's very early morning here. Well, not very early, it's 9 a.m. So thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to be talking about security and compliance, essentially how to get started, and it's not about 2 admin panels, kind of all the things that are included and how you can kind of keep up with them, and maybe some cool ways, hopefully you think they're cool ways of, trying not to spend all your time in the admin center trying to manage this stuff as well. So on that, so my name is Stacy Deere-Strole. I am a Microsoft Offices and Services Apps MVP. I am the founder and senior solutions architect at a company called Focal Point Solutions. You can find my contact information here on my social media. Oops. Feel free to reach out at any time if you have any questions. And also at the end, please, if you could take the time to supply some feedback and make sure to join the keynotes and show your love on social for the Teams Nation. They've done an amazing job on this event. All right, so we're going to cover some risks, getting started, the areas, taking action, getting secure and compliant, but mainly how to maintain, and then we'll just do some wrap up, any additional questions. Feel free to ask at any time as we're going through anything. So risks, by not paying attention or identifying that your company could have security risks, you run the risk of having data breaches. I know we have seen if a big company gets some sort of a data breach, we get emails, you see it on the news. I just got one the other day where it was a grocery chain, information was hacked. And so they provided anybody's that potentially their information was taken, a 2 years worth of, you got your, your credit score checked automatically. So they give you stuff free to help do that. Malware attack, PUPs. This is the only PUPs that people say that they don't like, which are potentially unwanted programs. Environment lockout. I know that sounds extreme. But I've actually had one client that was attacked, and it encrypted every single server within their organization. They had to spin up all new VMs and do snapshot restores. I don't want anybody else to have to go through that, so let's make sure we get secure, okay? Oops. The things that it also, in the risks, is it hurts your company's reputation. Your ability to keep the information that your clients are providing to you secure. So it is a huge reputation hit if that happens, and it's a huge expense to clean up. Like I just said, that the grocery chain, you can imagine how many customers use their system. So providing free credit score checking for 2 years, they paid a pretty penny for that, I'm sure. And backup management. Okay, I know people, they was like, oh, we're backed up, we're back up. We back up our data, but you also have to make sure that you can actually restore that data and your backups are actually working. So that's always a risk when it comes down to situations like this. Okay, so 2 of the main areas we're going to talk about is the security center and the compliance center. All right, so the security center, I look at that area this is where you configure. This is where you've identified your governance, and this is where you're going to configure all your governance to make sure that that stuff's working. And then the compliance center is kind of the area that kind of manages it all, gives you the dashboards, gives you the reports, provides you information so that you can keep reducing the risks and continue to keep your environment secure. All right, so under this security, you have a ton of different areas. Security is huge, and so is compliance technically, but the problem with these 2 is they actually duplicate each other a lot. You can find some of the same things in both. Microsoft is currently going through some revamping of the security and compliance centers again, where some things are going to live forever. I think will make a lot more sense, and the admin centers will get easier to go through. But under security, we have something called the Secure Score. We have sensitivity labels that you can create. You've got retention, data loss protection, records management, information governance, threat management, advanced hunting even. general data protection, regulation, e-discovery, and service assurance. So a lot of different things. Things you're like, oh, wow, that could really keep a, financial, medical, it can really make everybody secure. Under the compliance side, you have essentially like you kind of assess the situation. You're assessing what you have configured in the security. Solutions, it's providing you solutions based on how your environment, what is configured within your environment and how users are utilizing it. Corrective action is something or someone has violated something that you have configured under the security, and they're giving you an area to correct that situation. Also, where you can classify your data, set up policies, alerts, and the main area for configuring Microsoft Defender endpoint. Okay, so a lot of different things. However, one thing to keep in mind that the options that you have do vary on the plan that you own. So like your E3, E5, etc. I have provided a link in the slide that you can check out that will go through what is available with the different plans. Okay, so let's take a look. So instead of going through slides, I'm a big person, I'd rather show you guys what this kind of stuff looks like, but you do have some little key points here. So this is Microsoft M365 Admin Center, and I'm going to go to security. So the first thing that you always want to do is go see how secure you are right now. Well, Microsoft has provided a really great way for us to do this by looking at something called the Secure Score. Okay, so when you're in security, up here you'll see M365 Security Center. And then down here, you will see the Microsoft Secure Score. As you can see in this demo tenant that I have, it's not very secure. So I only have 11 out of 59 points, achieved. So if I want to see really get a breakdown here, I can select on it, and it gives me a little bit more information here, right? So I can see that nothing has been regressed, meaning you've already configured it, but Microsoft has put an update out around that area and you need to revisit it. How many items I have to address, if I have any planned, if I've accepted any of the risks, if anything is new, meaning recently added or recently updated. The other thing to take a look at, if you notice over here, you have a comparison score. So this is your organization score, and this is other organizations like you. So you have a comparison, right? As you can tell, other organizations like this demo tenant, the security is not very high. Probably not a good thing. So one of the things is, what do we do here? What can we do? How can we make this better? So if we go to improvement actions, they will provide a list of all the information or all the different items that need to be addressed. Notice right here that you can actually export this into a report, meaning if you can export it, means you can import it into a SharePoint list as well. Microsoft has put a lot of hooks into data that is inside the admin centers via, reports and list information such as this so that you can reuse them. And if there's a hook into them, just think about the things you can do with Flow, Power Apps, Power BI around these types of areas. So one note, you'll notice down here that we do have some that are completed, but we want to see these that say need to be addressed. So the very first one, the one that gets you the most points, is always require MFA. If I select that, notice here I can identify an action plan. So if I actually had, say, a third party, say Duo, that we used, I could say this is resolved through a third party, and I could say we use Duo to manage multi-factor. Okay, so I can do that, and I can save it, and this would close out this ticket, right? I could also say if it was resolved through an alternate mitigation, of course I'd need to put notes as well, or you can put risk accepted, meaning, we're just gonna see what happens. We're gonna see if we get hacked. We accept it. But if you want to address it, notice here it tells you which category. It tells you what it's going to protect against, and notice they're all hyperlinked, so you can see more information about them. which product this is attached to, so Azure Active Directory, and we will look at that in a little bit, and the users that will be impacted. Notice it will actually display the number of users, and you could actually see all the users here, okay? So over here, under implementations, it says prerequisites, you have Azure Active Directory Office app. Notice I got a green checkbox, means I have everything I need to do this. And then notice they have step-by-step what you need to do to actually implement or enable multi-factor authentication for your users. Once you have done so, and you save this, so save and close. So say you've configured it. After a little bit, it is not instantaneous. Keep that in mind. Once all this sync stuff happens in the background, after about a day, I always give it 24 to 48 hours, you will see that this will change to a 10 and it will be completed. Okay, and then you would go on down with the remainder of these items and do the same thing. I will give you guys one piece of information. On a number of tenants that I've been working in, doing security and compliance assessments and planning what they needed to do. On this particular one just hit me yesterday, so I was going to use it as an example. Turn on sign-in risk policy. So this is something that is configured in the conditional access in Azure Active Directory. Notice over here the prerequisite says Azure Active Directory Premium P2 is needed. On many of the tenants that I have been working with, this is showing a green check and not an X, meaning that the client has Azure Active Directory P2. As we go and we configure, it was not updating. We couldn't figure out why it wasn't updating. It wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. It turned out that the client really did not have Azure Active Directory Premium P2. They only had P1, but it is recording incorrectly in some of these areas. So as you're going through that, if you happen to run into one of those issues, what we are able to do is put a ticket into Microsoft. They do something on the back end to help resolve that issue. So just kind of one of those little tips there for you. Okay. So you'll just want to go down and handle each one of these areas if they, what they need to be for your organization. Not all of them are you going to configure because it may not make sense for you. Or you may, like I said, use a third-party tool, or, it's, based off of the security and compliance and stuff that you have to deal with, it doesn't make you compliant. So you just need to identify, put in notes, all that kind of stuff so that you've taken action, you've actually looked at it, okay? Now, the same thing essentially exists with compliance as well. But it actually works slightly different. So it's called the Compliance Manager. And once this pops up, all right, you will notice that there's a score of 59% here. So if we go into it, all right, one of the things you will notice is down here, Microsoft Managed Points Achieved. So Microsoft, when you configure your tenant, Microsoft actually has tasks that go out and essentially have the baseline type compliance things that it automatically goes and validates as set up and already completes. Then you're left with essentially the remaining items, okay? Now, the compliance score and report is a lot different from, even though they look the same, they're very much different. On the compliance one, what it is things that you should be thinking about or doing depending on what you're using in the environment. Now, when you export this one, one thing that you may notice, you may be looking at 300 lines or you may be looking at 600 lines that come out. Doesn't mean that you have to go through all of them to configure. One, some of the items in here, if you have configured it in the secure score over in security, it will actually complete the task over here. Notice the very first one says enable self-service password reset. That was the same thing that was over there on the security. So they do play off of each other. So this one is, like I said, you want to do the things that you need to do, but you're not required to do these, and it doesn't affect security per se on any of those types of things. They're just like, hey, if you're using, say, what is it, labels. If you're using labels or retention, you might want to think about you want to have this documentation done. You want to run this threat scenario, those types of different things. It's giving you things that you might want to look into, I guess is the best way to describe it. If you notice here, it shows you the regulations, the different solutions in here. So notice you got Azure Active Directory, Windows 10, Azure Information, Compliance Manager, Exchange. You have different areas, okay? And then you have the different categories as well: control access, management, compliance, protection information, etc. Okay, now notice some of them that have ran actually failed. So it kind of goes through these different things in your environment, sees if they're working or not. So if I open up one of these, it works somewhat similar to the secure score. Notice it tells you all your information, but you can assign this action to somebody. So say if it's a documentation type of scenario where it wants you to identify what your disaster recovery plan is. It wants to know that. If you have that information, you can assign it to the person that has written up your disaster recovery plan. They can put in their information and you can close it. Okay, so it's really just saying, hey, if you're doing this, make sure these types of things are done. So you have implementation status here, not implemented, implemented, alternative implementation, it's planned or it's out of scope. And then you can set your implementation date. You can have testing if there's testing going on with it, standards and regulations as well. So notice you got access control associated to it. And then any documents. So again, if it was like the disaster recovery plan, you could actually attach the document in here as well. Okay. So the other thing to keep in mind is you have a ton of different categories and you know, between like the control access, or actually the solutions is even a better way to look at it. If I put these all in order, the one thing that you will see is once Azure Active Directory is all together, you will see enable self password reset. Then down below, say under Exchange Online Protection, you may see enable self-service password reset as well. So they're all not unique. They will repeat, okay? Because if you're dealing with Azure Active Directory right now, because that's what you're implementing, it's going to require or suggest that you enable self-service password reset. But say you're not doing Azure Active Directory right now, you're doing Exchange Online Protection, it says these are the things that you'll want to look at, and it will repeat that way. If you complete one, it will complete the rest of them. So that's why when I say when you pull the report, it looks rather daunting because there's a lot of items in it, but it's not really because there are a lot of repeats, okay? And there's a lot of them that are just, hey, do you have your documentation? Do you have your governance essentially written for this piece, right? So it's pretty, it's a great way to say, to give you ideas of things that you need to think about as you're implementing different pieces and parts of M365, okay? Especially around the security area. All right, so we're going to go back to the security area here. Well, actually, one other area that I do want to show. Remember earlier I said that, you know, security and compliance just isn't wrapped into those two admin centers. The other area that you need to think about is Azure Active Directory. You want to go out there because there's security out there as well. A lot of the configuration that you do underneath security and some of the things that it's asking you to do in compliance is actually under Azure Active Directory. So these three admin centers are very key to work together, okay? So always remember that that one's just as important. A lot of people like the Azure, the company branding. So when you log in, that you see your logo or your company colors. Some people's like, well, it just makes it look nice. No, it actually lets your client, lets your users know that they're logging into the right tenant to, you know, to get the right information. They're not being spoofed. They're not logging into something else that's going to take their data, etc. So it's a great, great thing to actually make sure you have configured out there. But all this stuff kind of works together. All right. So on security, the other thing around this stuff is notice that the very first thing up here, it kind of talks about permissions. We're all familiar with like the SharePoint admin, Exchange admin, Teams admin, all those different types. But as you get into the security and compliance, there's a lot of stuff that is being configured. You see the classification, DLP, records management. I mean, you just see the list goes on here. Not one, and sometimes not two people can handle all this that's going on, especially if you're utilizing, these areas, throughout your organization, and you have a large organization. You may need additional people to help. They have provided roles within these two admin panels so that you can divvy out responsibilities to these. And that's a great thing to do because, someone who may be really big into GDPR, which you take that information, and then you have someone that, say, deals with threat management, those two don't exactly equate. Most likely one person is not going to know all there is about threat management and GDPR, right? So it allows you to set up some roles to kind of split that information out. Notice you can configure this page to what the way you want it, and that's why I bring up those roles. So depending on what your role is in security, you can configure your actual page for the stuff that is important to you, the things that you have to do day to day. Otherwise, you could, be searching quite a ways for some stuff. One of the other things that I always kind of call it the hidden gem that some people haven't seen or didn't know exactly what it does is the service assurance area. So it actually, if you have compliance regulations and standards like HIPAA and SOC and ISO, Microsoft has actually made it a little easier for you to find out what you have to be compliant or things for the applications and what that you're using. All right. So if you go in here, it says region and industry settings. You can go set your region. So I'm going to set North America, and my industry, we'll just say it's healthcare. Okay. So you can also your custom document filters as well by region and type as well. So if I just hit save here, oh, great, I'm going to get an error. Let's see if I go ahead and do this one, if it'll. Sometimes if doing one will error, if I do the other, it's still going to error. All right, so what this is supposed to do when it saves, I apologize for the error, is once you save that, you come down here and you go to View Trusted Documents provided by Microsoft or View Service Compliance Reports. So it's taking the area that your region that you're in and your industry, and it's supplying you. Come on. It's probably not going to show me because I can't select anything. Yeah, it's not going to show me. So once you set that, when you select these, you actually get a list of all of the compliance reports. Now it gives you all of them for all the functionality within M365, etc. And then you just need to go through the ones that you're actually utilizing and find out what what you have to do to be compliant in that area. And then you have the trust documents also do the same exact thing. It takes down to your region and your industry and provides you all the information. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier. A couple things that I like about this is, one, someone else is doing the work for you, right? And each year it's automatically being updated for you. You don't have to go do that. You just have to make sure that you guys in your organization can get to the information quickly and easily, which if you go to it, you'll be able to provide a link. I create a governance site, and I will show you guys that in a little bit. But you can put those links to that information right on that governance site. So if you're being audited, they can search, they can click on the link, they can see that information, and you kind of kill a lot of birds with one stone on that one. Okay. So those are things to keep in mind there. Microsoft also has given us a lot of reports. Earlier I mentioned where you can export information, from SharePoint lists and from like the Secure Store and Compliance. They give you a lot of reports that you can export. Again, they're providing you hooks to be able to go in and pull this information. So up here, I always, this is my favorite one. I actually have a demo environment that the number was way crazy one day, so it's kind of interesting. Likely spoofed domains over the past 7 days. Notice there were none. So I guess this demo environment's doing pretty well. But notice it gives you a lot of different items here. Now, these are really nice dashboards here. You got reports you can download. You can manage schedules for pulling your reports. But how often does anybody actually go out to the admin center, right? Typically, especially if you're an admin, this is what you do all day, but you've got other things as well. You're not just going to go out to the admin center to see what's wrong, right? So what you're going to do, you're going to be in your email. You're going to be in your SharePoint site doing those things. So you need things that are kind of right in your face. So you know how I mentioned that the Compliance Center essentially is that, that GUI version of all these things that you have configured in the back end, right? So if you notice here on the Compliance Center, here's a lot of those same things we just saw over there in security. And if you go over here, it just kind of shows you, well, it's not of sharing, but shows you the information that you've got configured, if I got any DLP policy matches, that type of stuff over here. And so you can see a lot of information over here, but again, how often do you guys come out here? How often do you think you'll come out here and see an alert, right? What I like to do is actually create a governance site like I had mentioned, because once you get all this information, what you want to do is be able to maintain it, right? So one of the things, we'll just go back over to slides real quick. I'll go back here, all right? So we've seen the areas we got to get secure, how to get to it, but maintaining is the key, right? So essentially before I tell anybody to start working on their security and compliance, they have to have their governance identified. I'm not saying they have to have it fully documented, but they have to know what it is. It'd be nice if they had it documented. In this process, it gets documented, but you want to have governance. In your governance, you should have things like how often you have to repeat some of these processes that we do, essentially auditing, right? So when I go through an assessment, I pull the secure, I pull the compliance, and I compare the compliance to the functionality that they're using and identify what they should be looking at. I pull like SharePoint OneDrive sharing, because that's security. Yes, it's called sharing and what you want them to share and what you don't want them to share, but that's still security. The Azure company branding, those types of, all those things are just as important. So you want to identify those repeating processes. So those are a process. I suggest do those quarterly checks, right? You can do reports, you can have dashboards, and like I mentioned, I like to do something called a governance site. So I'm actually going to show it to you live so I can kind of show you some things that I've done and kind of give you some ideas, right? So I just have a picture turner here and just some news and some events, but notice what I did here. So I have an alert section here. Now you could have this on your IT side or whatever. I just kind of like to keep all governance related things in a certain area, especially for demo purposes. But an alert that I'm getting that a virus, looks like a virus was detected in OneDrive or SharePoint. Its severity is high. But essentially the same information I could see in the admin panel, but I can see it in my day-to-day if I'm out here working in my SharePoint site, right? I could also think about the information that you're pulling from over there, pull it into a site to using Power BI and showing dashboards. So like if something happened, you're immediately being notified visually within your SharePoint site. You can get an email that also, to notify you that there's a problem, so you can quickly take action on any of the issues that are actually going on. It allows you just to kind of bring it all together, right? So you always don't have to go to the compliance center. You can, and it also helps management. So management likes the pretty pictures and kind of sees, when things are red or green, and you can show improvement. One of the biggest things, we had a client that they actually got hacked. Their security was not very well configured. So they essentially went through this process of assessing everything, and they essentially they failed their audit for security. So they actually created a page on their site that had their score where they were at, things that were being worked on and fixed, and as things were getting resolved, they could actually see where things were coming from the red to the yellow to the green, and seeing that their security was increasing throughout all these changes, which allows a visual representation easily to management so that they can understand. You know that things are getting better, just easier just to share the information and see the impact that you're making. Okay, so doing something like that, just reusing that data. All right, so some of the other things that I've done, what I do in this case is, notice I've got some different areas of governance up here. But there is this one I call terminology. So terminology is something, we all know what it is, what it means, but the reason why I have it up here is because there's so much in those admin panels, and understanding what everything means, not everybody's going to know, right? A lot of this stuff is very new to a lot of people. So what I've done is essentially just created a terminology area, and I've taken terminology from the admin centers, and I've written in the definition here. So someone doesn't have to go out, and search on Bing or Google to find out what something means. It also gives you the opportunity in this definition of what it means to your organization as well. So you know that they're getting the best description for what you're doing with, say, reporting or threat management or mail flow within your organization. And you can add other columns and categories and stuff in here to make it easier as well. And you could share this with, just your IT or people that are involved with security and compliance and governance, or you could share it with everybody, right? So that's something that I tend to add just to make things a little easier, especially for people who are coming within an organization that are new. So one of the other things with these other areas, what I do is actually go into site pages. And within site pages is what you'll see is the different pages that I have, but notice which policy. So I have security, retention, network architecture, and here's another retention. So the policy areas are the same thing as the different quick links on the page. So then I've also created an expiration date. Other things I add is like an owner, and if it's a draft or if it's published or main version type of scenario. And then essentially what, when this is all filled in, based on the expiration, I create a flow that goes out and looks, is there anything within the next 30, 60 days that is supposed to be updated, or because of X audit or whatever, and the flow would kick off and send an email to the person who owns that page with that information, so that they can go and update it, they can submit it, someone reviews it, gets approved, and the final version gets back out there. So you can make it an automated process. Also, by doing it this way, you don't always have to have such a you don't have to have a huge governance team. You can actually split like a page out here and there. So if I go to, I think I have networking, I got one under here. All right, so notice I went into networking, so it tells me this is the networking. I could have a bunch of docs, and it says, oh, this one's just on internet architecture. Okay, so I can see all the information here, what version it is, status is in the draft. If I select on it, then I'm actually seeing the information in a page, right? Notice I can add, someone can add comments down here, but they could read the information, the governance information around the internet architecture, and they have the option. The person can say, hey, we decommissioned DC 101 on X date, and we added a new one with version blah blah blah. So they're adding information. So they're supplying their governance team, the people who are managing this stuff, information so that then they can update this. So what you do by allowing people, we want people to know what our governance is, and allowing them to be able to comment on it means that everybody within your organization technically is helping you with governance. So you're not the only one. If you're assigned to a page, you're not the only one that is managing it, especially if you've got a bunch of pages of content that you manage. You're getting feedback from the people that use this information day to day, because that's why they're actually, selecting it. They want to know what it is. and they're providing you feedback on something that might be incorrect or need adjusted. So you're allowing more and more people to participate in it with you. Okay. I think I got one on network here too. Oh, that's the one. Retention. So here's just another one. You know, what is retention? Notice it says published, but I essentially just kind of automate this process. So you can go through, see the information, you know, notice here, they can make comments. You're including them. It's a great way to help keep your governance updated. It's a great place to share links, bring in information from the security or the compliance admin centers and bring it all into one place. Auditors love the fact they like to go to something, they want to search, or they want to click on something and get their information very, very fast. And by bringing it all together in a solution like this, you can actually do that. And it seems to go very well. I mean, it just seems to be easier. So like the admin centers can be very overwhelming. I mean, I'm getting ready to do a workshop down in Florida from like start to finish, planning, implementing. We're adding syntax into it on the back end, bringing all this stuff in and serving it up through syntax, which is another thing that you have the ability to do as well, which is going to help rather large organizations, identify security and compliance type of information. I'm very excited about that part. I was excited when the syntax came out because it was easily a big old light bulb for me. But there's a lot of information around these areas, and you have to find a great way to be able to not only gather the information, but maintain it. If you're not maintaining it, then there's almost no reason to do it at all. And if you're going to configure the security and compliance, you've got to keep up with it. It's not a configure once and it's going to be the same for the next 10, 12 years. It's going to change just like technology changes. So it's always going to be, it's always going to be very fluid. So you just got to find an easy way to be able to keep this information not only easy for you guys to utilize, but making sure the technology is backing you up and making sure, data breaches and people, you're not getting threats and all that kind of stuff as well. Okay. Any questions on that? Anybody like the idea of a governance site to help you out there? All right. So that is essentially my session on how to get started, how to bring it all together, ways to help you maintain the information. I know you guys have probably seen a lot of sessions already. There's a ton that is involved with security and compliance. I mean, I could do individual sessions on every single area within both of them. So it's a large bite. But if you guys work as a team with your organizations, I think you guys could do great things, and hopefully I gave you some tips to help out with that.